The sun was setting over the small dusty town at the edge of human space. The sky glowed orange, and the air smelled of oil, metal, and sand. In the middle of the town stood an old workshop, its roof patched with scrap metal and its walls stained with smoke from years of work. Inside, the sounds of clanking tools and humming machines filled the air. Myra stood at her workbench, hands black with grease, her eyes focused on a broken bike engine. She was young, not more than 20, with sharp eyes that always searched for details no one else noticed. She loved machines more than anything else. They made sense to her in a way people never did. If a part broke, you replaced it. If something did not fit, you adjusted it. Machines had rules. People had moods. Her boss, an older man named Harris, paced behind her. He was always impatient and never gave her credit for her work. "Hurry up, girl," he grumbled. "We don't have all day." Myra stayed quiet. She knew talking back would only make him angrier. Instead, she tightened a bolt, wiped her hands, and tested the engine again. With a cough and a roar, it came alive. The bike shook slightly, but the sound was strong and steady. She smiled a little. "It's done," she said simply. The customer, a local farmer, nodded in relief and paid Harris. The man barely glanced at Myra, even though she had done all the work. She was used to it. Every day felt the same. She fixed, Harris collected. She spoke little, and people rarely noticed her. But that night, everything changed. As the stars appeared over the desert sky, the ground began to tremble. At first, Myra thought it was just another storm rolling in. But soon, she heard the low rumble of engines. Heavy, deep, and rough, unlike anything she had heard before. Outside, people hurried to the street. Children pointed. Shopkeepers closed their doors. Fear filled the air as a group of massive bikes rolled into town. They were dark, decorated with strange symbols, and their engines glowed faintly with an unnatural light. The riders wore heavy coats, visors, and helmets that hid their faces. Everyone whispered the same name: the Hells Angels. They were not ordinary bikers. They were outlaws, known across the colonies. Some called them criminals, others rebels. No one dared to stand against them. They carried with them the scent of danger, like fire hidden in the wind. The riders slowed and stopped right in front of Harris's workshop. The largest bike, black with glowing red lines across its frame, sputtered and hissed. Its rider swung down. He was taller than most, his arms strong, his face marked with scars. He lifted his helmet, revealing sharp eyes that scanned the workshop. People nearby stepped back, not wanting to be seen. Rex, the leader of the Hells Angels, spoke in a deep voice. "This machine needs fixing." He pointed to the bike behind him. Sparks fell from its engine, and smoke drifted out. The machine looked alive, as if it might bite anyone who touched it. Harris froze. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he stammered, "Yes, sir, I don't know if we can handle something like that." The other riders chuckled darkly. One leaned forward and said, "What's wrong, mechanic?" "Afraid." Harris's hands shook. Everyone knew that to refuse the Hells Angels was dangerous. But touching their bikes could also mean disaster. They were said to be built from hybrid tech, half machine, half alien design. Most mechanics could not even understand them. Myra watched silently, her heart beating faster. She had never seen machines like this before. Strange wires pulsed faintly, as if the bike had a heartbeat. She stepped forward without thinking. "I can fix it," she said. The words surprised even her. Harris's head snapped toward her. His eyes widened in anger. "You. Stay quiet, girl," he hissed. But Rex turned his head slowly, his eyes narrowing at her. He studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Show me," he said simply. The crowd murmured. Harris pulled Myra's arm. "Don't you dare," he whispered harshly. "These aren't toys. One wrong move and you'll be the one paying." Myra shook his hand off. For the first time, she ignored him. She walked toward the bike, her tools heavy in her belt. She crouched beside it, feeling the heat radiating from its engine. Carefully, she opened the side panel. Inside, she saw a mix of familiar metal parts and glowing crystals she had never touched before. The system was strange, almost alive. But she noticed the problem immediately. One of the stabilizers was cracked, leaking energy into the main line. She reached into her tool bag, hands steady. The bikers watched silently. Even Harris stayed quiet now, too afraid to interfere. Piece by piece, Myra adjusted the engine, replacing the stabilizer with a makeshift repair, sealing the leak with melted alloy. She worked quickly but carefully, her mind locked onto the rhythm of the machine. An hour passed. Sweat rolled down her face. Her hands were black with grease and faint blue sparks. Finally, she stood, wiped her forehead, and nodded. "Try it now." Rex swung onto the bike, pressed the ignition, and twisted the throttle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life with a deep, powerful growl. The strange red lines across the frame pulsed evenly, brighter than before. The ground shook under its strength. The bikers cheered, slapping their hands against the air. One of them whistled loudly. "She fixed it?" Rex said nothing at first. He simply stared at Myra. Then, slowly, he gave a single nod. It was not a smile, not quite thanks, but it was something more powerful: respect. The crowd, however, whispered in fear. No one had ever dared touch a Hell's Angel bike. And this young mechanic girl had not only touched one, she had mastered it. Myra stood still, her heart racing. For the first time in her life, she felt noticed. Not ignored, not brushed aside, but seen. She did not know it yet, but that moment would change everything. The night after Myra fixed the strange bike, the town was buzzing with whispers. People gathered in the market, in taverns, even by the water pumps, speaking about the young mechanic girl who dared to touch a Hell's Angels machine. Some voices were impressed, some were fearful, but all carried the same disbelief. "She fixed it like it was nothing," one man muttered. "They'll come back for her," a woman said nervously. "Mark my words, nothing good comes from dealing with those bikers," another warned. Myra walked through town the next morning with her small bag of tools slung across her shoulder. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her. Some faces turned away, pretending not to notice her. Others stared openly, their looks heavy with judgment. Myra ignored them as best as she could. She had grown used to being unseen, but now, being seen felt no better. When she reached the workshop, Harris was already waiting at the door. His face was red, his lips tight. "You," he snapped, pointing a finger at her. "Get inside." Myra obeyed, setting her bag on the workbench. Harris closed the door behind them. The shop smelled of smoke and hot metal as usual, but the air felt heavier than ever. "What you did last night," Harris began, pacing in front of her, "was foolish. Reckless. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you've brought on me? On this workshop?" Myra frowned. "I fixed a bike. That's what I'm here for." "That was not just a bike," Harris barked, slamming his hand against the table. "That was one of their machines. The Hell's Angels. You don't fix things for them. You don't even speak to them. Do you understand?" Myra stood still, her jaw tightening. She wanted to say more, to tell him he was wrong, but she held her tongue. Harris continued, his voice rising. "Now the whole town thinks I work for them. The council will come asking questions. People are already afraid to bring their repairs here. My business is ruined because of you. Myra's hands curled into fists. She wanted to remind him that it was she, not him, who had repaired every machine in this shop for months. It was her skill that kept the workshop alive. But before she could speak, Harris gave his verdict. "You're finished here," he said coldly. "Take your tools and get out. I won't have an outlaw's helper under my roof." The words hit Myra like a blow. She stared at him, her chest tightening. "You're firing me? After everything I've done?" "Don't talk back," Harris snapped. "Leave before I call the guards." For a long moment, Myra stood frozen. Then, slowly, she picked up her small bag of tools, slung it across her shoulder again, and walked toward the door. Her steps were heavy, but her eyes stayed dry. She would not give Harris the satisfaction of seeing her break. When she opened the door, the light of morning hit her face. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, curious to see what would happen. When they saw her leaving with her bag, they began whispering again. "There she is, the outlaw's mechanic," someone muttered. "Fired, just like I thought," another said. "Better she leaves before she brings more trouble here," an older man added. Myra walked past them without a word. Their voices stung, but she held her head high. By midday, she sat alone on a broken bench near the edge of town. The desert wind blew softly, carrying dust across the road. Her bag rested beside her, her only possession now. She stared at the horizon, wondering what she would do. She had no credits, no family, and no place that wanted her. For the first time, the machines she loved could not give her an answer. As the sun sank low, the sound of engines rose again. That same heavy rumble, deep and wild. Myra looked up to see the Hells Angels returning, their dark bikes glowing faintly as they rolled into town once more. People scattered quickly, locking doors, closing shutters. The main street emptied until only Myra sat watching. The bikes stopped in front of her. Rex, the leader, dismounted. His boots crunched against the gravel as he walked toward her. His scarred face was calm, his eyes sharp. "You," he said in his low voice. "You're out." Myra did not flinch. "Yes," she said. "My boss fired me." Rex tilted his head slightly. "Because you touched our machine." "Because I fixed it," Myra replied, her voice firm. For the first time, a faint smile touched Rex's lips. He nodded slowly. "Good. You did what others feared to do. You have skill." Behind him, the other riders murmured in agreement. One with a heavy beard said, "She's got more guts than the whole town." Another added, "Never seen hands work like hers." Myra looked down at her bag. "It doesn't matter. I have nowhere to go now." Rex's eyes studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe you do." He gestured toward the bikes. Their engines purred softly, glowing under the setting Sunday. "Ride with us. We travel beyond these roads, beyond these worlds. We don't belong to towns like this." "Neither do you." Myra's heart skipped. The offer was strange, almost unreal. She had heard stories of the angels riding through space, crossing dark highways between stars on their powerful machines. It sounded dangerous, perhaps even foolish. But when she looked at the town behind her, the closed doors, the judging faces, the life that had rejected her, she felt a pull stronger than fear. Still, doubt whispered in her mind. "If I go with you," she asked quietly, "what will I become?" Rex stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the road as he said, "That is for you to decide. But I see no mechanic's apprentice. I see someone who can change the ride itself." The engines roared behind him, wild and free. Myra's fingers tightened around her bag of tools. She thought of Harris's angry face, of the townspeople's whispers, of the endless cycle of fixing machines for others who never cared. Then she thought of the bike she had repaired, alive with power under her touch. Slowly, Myra stood. She did not answer immediately, but her steps carried her toward the row of bikes. The riders watched in silence. She reached out and touched the cool frame of the nearest machine. It pulsed faintly under her hand, like a heart. At last, she looked back at Rex. "Show me the road," she said. Rex gave a single nod. "Then ride with us." The engines thundered louder, filling the empty street. As the sun fell and the stars rose, Myra climbed onto the back of Rex's bike. The machine growled beneath her, and for the first time, she felt the pull of something greater than herself. Together, the Hells Angels roared out of the town, leaving dust and whispers behind. And Myra, the fired mechanic girl, rode into a future no one could have imagined. The night sky stretched above like a sea of stars. Myra sat on the back of Rex's bike, her hands gripping the cold metal rail as the engines of the Hells Angels roared around her. The sound was like thunder rolling across the desert, deep and powerful, making the ground tremble. The town behind them grew smaller and smaller until its lights were nothing more than faint dots on the horizon. Myra did not look back. Her eyes were fixed on the road ahead, lit by the red glow of the bike's engines. For the first time in her life, she felt she was leaving something behind, not just a place, but an entire life. The wind rushed past her face. She had ridden small bikes before, testing them after repairs, but this was nothing like that. Rex's machine was alive beneath her, every turn of the engine sending vibrations through her body. It was faster, stronger, and stranger than anything she had touched before. After a long stretch of silence, Rex spoke over the roar of the engine. "Hold tight. The road will change soon." Myra frowned, not understanding. "Change?" she asked, her voice barely reaching his ear. "You'll see," he answered simply. The desert stretched on endlessly until, suddenly, Rex leaned forward and pressed something on the handlebar. The bike's red lines glowed brighter, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. The ground beneath their wheels bent and shifted, no longer solid but like rippling water. Myra gasped as the road dissolved into a dark, endless tunnel filled with streaks of starlight. They were no longer riding on the desert floor. They were riding in space. Her eyes widened as she looked around. The stars blurred, rushing past them in streams of light. Other bikes followed close behind, their glowing engines cutting paths through the strange dark highway. Myra gripped the rail tighter, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. This isn't possible," she whispered. Rex's voice was calm. "It is possible when you don't follow rules others made. Our bikes carry cores not from this world. We ride the dark highways between stars. Roads no ship dares to travel." Myra stared in awe. She had studied machines her whole life, but she had never imagined something like this could exist. Ships traveled through space with heavy engines, long jumps, and precise coordinates. But these bikes, they rode like travelers on an open road, free and wild. The other bikers howled with joy as they leaned into the strange currents of the highway. Sparks and trails of light followed them as if the stars themselves were chasing. Myra's fear began to fade, replaced by wonder. "How does it work?" she asked, her voice louder now, filled with curiosity. Rex gave a low chuckle. "You already saw the heart of it. Half metal, half crystal. A machine, yet more than machine. Few can touch it without burning. But you saw the problem and fixed it like it was nothing. That is why I knew you belonged here." Myra felt a warmth in her chest. Belonged. It was a word she had never heard directed at her before. Not from Harris, not from the townspeople. As they rode, she noticed something else. Some of the other bikes sputtered now and then, their engines coughing, their lights flickering unevenly. Her trained eyes could see the issues: the wrong angle of a pipe, the strain of a loose connection, the unstable glow of a cracked crystal. She leaned forward and shouted to Rex, "Your bikes, they're not balanced. I can see the problems." Rex tilted his head slightly, listening. "We ride them as they are. We have no one to fix them the way you fixed mine." "I can fix them," Myra said quickly, her voice steady. "All of them. They'll ride smoother, stronger. You won't break down in the middle of the road." Rex was silent for a moment. Then he gave a short nod. "Then when we stop, you will show us." The dark highway stretched on, endless and wild. Myra leaned back slightly, her heart still racing, but now with excitement rather than fear. She realized this was more than just a ride, it was the start of something new. Hours passed, though time felt strange in the dark. Finally, the angels slowed, their bikes gliding toward a floating platform hidden in the void. It looked like a scrap-built rest stop, hovering with flickering lights and metal frames. Other riders and drifters were already there, their machines lined up along the edge. The angels parked, their engines cooling with soft growls. Myra slid off the bike, her legs unsteady from the long ride. The ground under her feet felt unreal after so long moving through the stars. The other riders gathered, curious about her. Some looked doubtful, others amused. One, with a thin scar across his cheek, asked, "So this is the girl who touched your bike, Rex?" Rex nodded once. "She has hands like no other. She will tune our rides." The riders laughed. One said, "A mechanic girl fixing angel bikes? That's a first." Another shrugged. "Let her try. Maybe she breaks them all." Myra ignored their doubt. She crouched beside one of the sputtering bikes, running her hands along its side, listening to its hum. Her fingers found a loose joint, her eyes spotted a cracked seal. Quickly, she pulled tools from her bag and began working. Sparks flew, her hands moved with certainty, and within minutes the bike's glow steadied. The rider who owned it tested the ignition. The engine roared strong, smoother than ever before. His eyes widened. "It rides better than when I got it." The laughter around them faded. Riders leaned closer, curious now, eager. One by one, they pushed their bikes toward her. Myra worked tirelessly, repairing, adjusting, tuning. Each machine grew steadier, faster, stronger under her hands. By the time she finished, the platform echoed with the sound of engines purring like predators ready to run. The angels looked at her differently now, not as an outsider, not as a girl from a dusty town, but as one of their own. Rex placed a hand on her shoulder. "You see, Myra. The road changes. And now, so do you." Myra looked around at the glowing bikes, at the riders who now nodded with respect. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a shadow behind someone else's work. She felt like the center of it all. The dark highway waited beyond the platform, endless and full of danger. But as Myra's heart beat fast in her chest, she knew she was no longer afraid. She was ready to ride into it. The dark platform floated in silence, surrounded by the endless stars. Myra stood in the center of the bikes, her hands black with grease, her hair tangled from hours of work. Around her, the Hell's Angels tested their machines, the engines rumbling steady and strong. Sparks of light danced across the strange crystals inside, but none sputtered or failed anymore. For the first time, Myra was not invisible. Every pair of eyes looked at her with respect. One rider, a broad man named Joran, slapped the side of his newly tuned bike and grinned. "This machine has never run so smooth. Not even when I first got it." Another, younger and slimmer, nodded eagerly. "She saved my ride too. No more shaking every time I hit the highway." The riders began laughing and cheering, the sound echoing across the platform. Myra felt warmth in her chest. She had been working on machines her whole life, but this was the first time anyone celebrated her work. Rex stepped forward, his boots heavy on the metal floor. He studied her quietly, then spoke in his calm, deep voice. "You gave us more than repairs. You gave us speed, strength, freedom. For that, you have our respect." Myra looked up at him. She had never needed praise before, but his words struck her deeply. For so long she had lived under Harris's shadow, her work taken for granted. Now, every moment here reminded her she was more than just a nameless mechanic. The bikers began preparing food from their supplies, cooking over small plasma burners. Myra sat among them, listening to their laughter and stories. They spoke of wild races through asteroid belts, narrow escapes from patrol ships, and secret routes through forgotten systems. Their voices were rough, but their laughter was genuine. For the first time, Myra allowed herself to laugh with them. She felt lighter, as if she belonged. Yet, even as she smiled, a voice of doubt whispered inside her. Was this truly where she belonged? These riders were outlaws. The townspeople had feared them for good reason. And though they laughed now, she had heard the whispers before that the angels stole, that they fought, that they were dangerous. Later that night, when most of the bikers had fallen asleep beside their bikes, Myra sat apart, her eyes fixed on the endless stars. Rex joined her quietly, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You are thinking," he said simply. Myra nodded. "I don't know if I should be here. The town called you criminals. The council warns against you. And yet, you don't feel like the stories." Rex looked up at the stars. His scarred face was calm, but his voice carried weight. "Stories are told by those in power. The syndicate rules the colonies. They call us criminals because we don't bow to them. We fight them when we must, we take from them when we can, but we never serve them." Myra frowned. "So you are rebels?" Rex gave a short nod. "Yes. Rebels, outlaws, riders. Whatever name they give us, we live free." His words stirred something inside her. She remembered Harris shouting, the townspeople whispering, the closed doors that pushed her out. Were they truly free, those people who bowed to councils and syndicates? Or were they trapped in their own cages? Rex glanced at her. "I see the question in your eyes. You wonder if we are dangerous. The answer is yes. But danger is the price of freedom." Myra lowered her gaze. She was not sure if she was ready for such a price. The next day, the riders prepared to leave. The bikes glowed brightly, engines humming like wild animals eager to run. Myra worked again, checking seals, tightening bolts, making sure nothing would fail. She moved from bike to bike with confidence, and each rider thanked her with nods or quiet words. As they prepared to ride, a signal flashed across the platform's comms screen. A message from the nearest colony station. It carried the seal of the council. "Attention, Hell's Angels. Leave the system at once. Your presence is unlawful. Any who aid you will share your punishment." The message repeated twice, then vanished. The platform grew silent. The bikers looked at each other, then burst into laughter. "They think we care about their warnings," Joran said, shaking his head. Another rider grinned. "Let them send patrols. Our wheels will leave them behind." But Myra stood still, her chest tight. The warning was not just for the angels. It was for anyone with them. If she stayed, the councils would mark her too. She would no longer be seen as a simple mechanic. She would be seen as one of them, an outlaw. She found herself trembling slightly. Was she ready for that? That evening, as the riders rested before their next journey, Myra overheard Rex speaking to two of his trusted riders. His voice was low, but the words carried. "The syndicate is moving shipments through the outer ring. If we strike them, we can cut their supply lines. They won't ignore us then. Myra froze. The bikes she had just repaired would not simply carry riders on highways of starlight. They would soon race into battle. Her hands had given them strength for war. The thought unsettled her. She was proud of her work, but she had never built machines for destruction. She wondered if she had just tied herself to something far darker than she imagined. When night fell, Myra lay awake near the humming glow of Rex's bike. Her mind raced. The angels treated her like family, yes. They gave her respect, a place to belong. But belonging here meant sharing their path: rebellion, raids, fights against the syndicate. She remembered Harris's words, harsh and bitter. "You're an outlaw's helper now." At the time, she had denied it. Now, she was not so sure. Still, when she looked around at the riders sleeping beside their bikes, she saw no monsters. She saw people who trusted her, people who valued her hands, her mind. The stars above were endless, the road ahead uncertain. Myra knew she stood at a crossroad. She could still walk away, try to find a new life somewhere far from here. Or she could stay, ride with them, and become part of something far greater though far more dangerous. As her eyes drifted shut, the engines purred softly around her, like a lullaby made of fire and steel. Myra whispered to herself, almost a question, almost a promise, "Is this my family now?" Myra stood in the workshop, staring at the empty corner where she used to keep her tools. The shop had been quiet since she was fired. The sound of clanking wrenches and humming engines was gone, replaced only by the low hum of silence. She missed the smell of oil and the sound of gears clicking into place. But more than anything, she missed working on machines. Her heart ached, but she didn't want to show weakness. She thought about the words the biker leader had said when he shook her hand, "You got fire in you, girl. Don't let them kill it." Those words echoed in her head. The next morning, Myra decided to visit the biker group again. She walked down the dusty street, her jacket zipped tight against the wind. When she reached their small garage, she found the men standing around, working on another old bike. The leader, the one everyone called Hawk, spotted her first. "You came back," Hawk said, wiping his hands on a rag. His voice carried a mix of surprise and respect. "I couldn't sit at home," Myra replied softly. "I need to work. I need engines, not silence." The men exchanged looks. Most of them nodded. They had seen her skill before. She wasn't just a curious girl anymore. She was one of them now, even if she didn't wear their patch. Hawk motioned her inside. "We got something for you." They showed her an old motorcycle frame, rust crawling over its sides like vines. "This bike's been sitting here for years. No one had the patience to bring it back." "Think you can?" Hawk asked. Myra ran her fingers over the frame. She saw the story in it, years of dust, forgotten rides, and broken memories. But she also saw potential. She smiled. "Yes. I can." For the next few days, Myra worked side by side with the bikers. They didn't treat her like a weak outsider anymore. They treated her like family. One man brought her food, another brought spare parts, and Hawk often stood beside her, giving advice but letting her lead the work. Every bolt she tightened, every piece she cleaned, every adjustment she made, it all brought life back to the forgotten bike. Slowly, the rust gave way to shine, the silence gave way to the growl of an engine being reborn. By the end of the week, the bike was ready. Myra rolled it out into the sunlight, its chrome gleaming like fire. The bikers gathered around, their eyes wide. "Start it," Hawk said. Myra turned the key, pressed the starter, and the bike roared to life. The sound echoed through the street, strong and full. The men cheered, some clapping her on the back, others whistling. Myra smiled, her face glowing with pride. "You did it," Hawk said, his eyes shining. "That bike was dead. You brought it back." Myra looked at the machine and then at the men around her. For the first time since losing her job, she didn't feel broken. She felt alive. But the moment didn't last long. Word spread quickly in the town. People whispered about the girl who had fixed a bike the bikers had abandoned. Some were impressed, others were jealous. And soon, her old boss heard the news. One evening, as Myra locked the garage, her old boss, Mr. Dalton, appeared. He stood tall, his face sharp with anger. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said. "Helping criminals instead of working an honest job." Myra's hands tightened on the lock. "I didn't hide. You fired me. You didn't believe in me." Dalton's face reddened. "You embarrassed me. No customer wants to see a girl working on their machines. You should have stayed in your place." Hawk, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. His presence was heavy, his voice calm but dangerous. "She belongs where her skills shine. And that's here. She's got more talent in her hands than half the people you hire." Dalton sneered. "This isn't over. She's going to ruin herself working with people like you." He turned and walked away, his shadow stretching long against the setting sun. Myra watched him go, her heart heavy but her spirit unbroken. She knew this was just the beginning. Later that night, the bikers invited her to sit with them around a fire outside the garage. The flames flickered, painting their faces in shades of gold and red. They talked about roads they had traveled, storms they had faced, and choices they had made. One of them turned to Myra. "So, what will you do now? You can't go back to that shop. And the town may turn against you if you keep standing with us." Myra looked into the fire. The crackling flames reminded her of the engines she loved, wild, powerful, untamed. She thought about her old life, filled with small tasks and constant doubt. And she thought about the bike she had just rebuilt, roaring like a beast under her hands. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I know I can't stop now. I want to build more. Fix more. Maybe even make my own shop, one where no one cares if it's a man or woman holding the wrench. Only skill should matter." The men nodded, their respect for her growing deeper. Hawk smiled. "Then maybe it's time to start carving your own road. We'll ride with you, if you ask." Myra felt her chest swell with determination. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready to face it. But deep down, she also knew Dalton wasn't finished. And neither was her journey. The road of choices stretched long ahead, full of shadows and firelight. And Myra was ready to ride it. The morning was quiet in the small town, but inside the workshop, it was full of noise and sparks. Myra was working on the last piece of the bike she had rebuilt for Leon. It was not just a machine now, it was a symbol of their friendship, their struggles, and their victory over doubt. Her hands were steady as she tightened the bolts, checked the wiring, and polished the chrome. Every part of the bike reflected her skill and care. She stepped back slowly, wiping her forehead, and smiled. The bike stood tall, shining like new, stronger than before. Leon walked in, his heavy boots making a low thud on the concrete floor. His eyes widened when he saw the bike. "It's ready?" he asked, his voice full of surprise. Myra nodded. "Yes. I wanted it perfect for you. This is your last ride before you take it back to your group." Leon touched the bike gently, like he was afraid it might vanish. His rough hand slid over the polished metal, and for a moment, he was silent. Then he looked at Myra with a serious face. "You know something? No one else could have done this. Not the way you did." Myra felt her heart grow warm. "It's not just about fixing machines. It's about respect. I gave this bike the respect it deserved. Leon laughed softly. Respect. That's something people forget. But you didn't. They rolled the bike outside, into the sunlight. The town was already awake, and people watched quietly from the sidewalks. They had all heard the stories about how Myra had been fired unfairly, about how she stood her ground, and how Leon, the rider from the road, had chosen her work above all. Leon swung his leg over the bike and started the engine. The roar was powerful, deep, and alive. It was not just sound, it was music. The crowd stepped back, covering their ears, but their eyes were wide with wonder. Myra stood with her arms folded, watching. She had rebuilt many bikes, but this one was special. This one carried her story. Leon revved the engine once, then turned to Myra. You coming for one last ride? Myra blinked in surprise. Me? On your bike? Why not? You built it? You should feel what it's like on the road. The people around them whispered. Some were shocked, some were jealous, but most were excited. Myra hesitated, then nodded. She climbed onto the seat behind Leon, holding the edge tightly. Leon looked over his shoulder. Hold on. The road doesn't wait for anyone. The bike roared again, louder this time, and then they were moving. The tires gripped the road as they sped out of town. Wind whipped through Myra's hair, and the world blurred around her. She had ridden on bikes before, but this was different. She could feel every part of the machine, the engine, the wheels, the rhythm, and she knew each piece because she had put it there. They passed fields, rivers, and open sky. The wind was wild, but Myra laughed. It was freedom, raw and real. Leon grinned, his eyes on the road, but he could feel her joy behind him. This is what it's all about, he shouted over the roar of the engine. Myra nodded, though he couldn't see her. Yes, she yelled back. Hours passed like minutes. Finally, they reached a high hill that overlooked the valley. Leon slowed the bike and stopped at the edge. They got off and stood together, looking down at the wide open land. Myra breathed deeply. It's beautiful. Leon crossed his arms. This is where riders come to think. Out here, there's no bosses, no rules, no limits. Just the road and the sky. Myra felt the truth of his words. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She was part of something bigger, the spirit of the road, the freedom of riders who refused to be broken. Leon turned to her. You're not just a mechanic, Myra. You're more. You proved yourself, not just to me, but to everyone. People will remember this. Myra smiled. Maybe. But I don't care about fame. I just want to keep building, keep fixing, keep proving that I belong. Leon nodded slowly. And you will. The road isn't the end. It's just the start. The sun began to set, painting the sky with orange and red. They rode back into town, slower this time, enjoying every moment. When they returned, the crowd was still there, waiting. Children cheered, old men nodded in respect, and workers clapped their hands. The town had changed. Myra had changed. She was no longer just the girl who got fired. She was the mechanic who fixed the impossible bike, the rider who faced the road with courage, and the person who showed everyone what true skill and determination looked like. Leon parked the bike and stood beside her. This isn't the end, Myra. It's the beginning of your own road. Follow it, and you'll go farther than anyone thought you could. Myra looked at him, then at the shining bike, and then at the faces around her. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she would never stop. The night came, and the stars filled the sky. Myra stood outside the workshop, watching the lights above. The road was waiting, endless and full of mystery. And she was ready. The first light of dawn painted the sky in pale pink and gold. Myra stood outside the workshop, looking at the rows of bikes resting in the early light. Each machine carried a story she had helped write with her hands, her mind, and her courage. She ran her fingers over the polished metal of the newest bike, feeling the warmth of the engine beneath her touch. It had been weeks since she had left Harris's shop. In that short time, her life had changed completely. She had found respect, friendship, and a place where she truly belonged. The Hells Angels, or rather, the riders she now called friends, had become more than allies. They were family, in a way she had never experienced before. Hawk, the leader who had first given her the chance, approached her quietly. His boots clanged against the metal floor, but he didn't startle her. She had grown used to his presence, his calm confidence, and the way he seemed to understand machines as well as people. "You ready for the next road?" he asked. Myra looked at him and smiled. "Always. But, where are we going this time?" Hawk grinned, the edges of his scar lifting slightly. "Somewhere new. A place no one has ridden before. The outer ring has stretches untouched by patrols, untouched by anyone. We'll see if your skills can handle it." Myra's heart raced with excitement. "I'm ready," she said firmly. The riders gathered, their engines humming like restless beasts. They lined up in rows, bikes polished, engines tuned, lights glowing faintly in the morning. Myra felt the familiar thrill of anticipation in her chest, the same feeling she had the first time she rode with them, but stronger now. She was no longer afraid. She was part of something bigger, something endless. Before mounting the bike, she took a deep breath and looked back at the small town she had left behind. Some people were awake already, watching silently from windows and doorways. She caught the eye of a young boy leaning against the fence. He gave her a shy smile, and Myra waved. "Don't stop chasing what you love," she whispered to him. "Keep going." Then she turned forward and climbed onto her own bike. The engine roared under her hands, alive and eager. She looked to Hawk, who nodded. The signal was given. The Hells Angels moved as one, a river of glowing machines flowing through the empty streets and into the wide open fields beyond. Myra leaned forward, gripping the handlebars, feeling the power and freedom under her. This road was hers as much as it was theirs, and she intended to ride it fully. Hours passed, and the scenery changed. Dusty plains gave way to rocky canyons, and narrow trails stretched between towering cliffs. The sun climbed higher, reflecting off the bike's polished metal. Myra followed closely behind Hawk, studying his movements, learning the rhythm of the road. "Your hands are steady," Hawk said over the hum of engines. "The bikes obey you now, like they obey no one else." Myra smiled. "I guess they know who fixes them best." Hawk laughed, a deep sound that echoed across the canyon. "Yes. And I think they like you too." The day turned to evening, and the riders slowed at a small plateau overlooking a glowing river. Myra stepped off her bike and ran her hands along the surface, marveling at the way the light shimmered across it. For a moment, she forgot everything, her old life, her doubts, even the danger ahead. She was just here, with her friends, and the machines she loved. Hawk stood beside her. "This is what we fight for," he said quietly. "Not gold, not fame, not rules. Freedom. The road, the skies, the rivers, the stars. That's ours." Myra nodded. She felt it deep in her chest, a truth she had always known but never fully embraced until now. This was more than fixing machines or riding bikes. It was about living fully, making choices that mattered, and trusting yourself to face whatever came next. As night fell, the stars spread across the sky like a blanket. The riders set up small fires, sharing food and stories. Myra sat quietly, listening. She could feel the bonds growing stronger, the unspoken respect between all of them. They were a family forged on the road, connected not by blood but by trust, skill, and loyalty. Later, Hawk approached her again. "You've done more than just fix machines," he said softly. "You've reminded us all what it means to ride with purpose. That's something only you could do." Myra's eyes glistened. I never thought I could make a difference." "You already have," he replied. "And you'll do even more. The road doesn't end here. There's always another horizon, another challenge, another ride waiting for those willing to take it." Myra looked out at the stars. She imagined the roads she would ride, the bikes she would repair, the lives she might touch. She knew her journey was far from over. There would be challenges, dangers, and moments of doubt. But she also knew she had the courage, skill, and heart to face them all. The next morning, the riders mounted their bikes again. Myra climbed onto hers, feeling the engine's steady hum. Hawk signaled, and they moved forward, leaving the plateau behind. Dust swirled around their wheels, mixing with the first rays of sunlight. The world stretched endlessly ahead, full of possibilities. Myra smiled, gripping the handlebars tightly. She had started as a girl who was ignored, underestimated, and fired. Now she was a mechanic, a rider, and a part of something bigger than herself. She had found family, freedom, and a road that would never end. The wind rushed past her, carrying the scent of adventure, metal, and possibility. The engines roared, powerful and alive. Myra leaned forward, heart pounding with excitement, and felt the road beneath her as if it were part of her own body. The horizon ahead was wide, endless, and inviting. And Myra knew, with every fiber of her being, that she would ride it fully, boldly, and without fear. This was only the beginning.